Hi, and welcome to our demo for Pressbooks EDU. The Maryland Open Source Textbook Initiative is partnering with Pressbooks EDU to offer a 25% discount for Maryland institutions when they subscribe to a Pressbooks EDU Silver Plan through the Maryland Open Source Textbook Initiative. So what is the Maryland Open Source Textbook Initiative? Let me take a minute to tell you a little bit more about that before Liz gets started. Led by the University System of Maryland's William E. Kerwin Center for Academic Innovation, in partnership with Maryland Online, the Maryland Association of Community Colleges, and the Maryland Independent College and University Association, M.O.S.T, as it's called, is increasing access, affordability, and achievement for Maryland higher ed students through open educational resources. Our mission is to support long-term statewide scaling and sustainability of fully accessible, openly licensed course materials by providing the infrastructure Maryland's public higher ed institutions need to collaborate and co-create, OER, as well as by empowering and rewarding faculty who capitalize on the opportunities afforded by openly licensed materials to optimize student learning through continuous quality improvement. Our partnership with Pressbooks EDU is one way we hope to support effective and efficient adoption, adaptation, and creation of OER to optimize student achievement. So now on to Pressbooks. Pressbooks can be used for content creation, for remixing and revising existing OER, and for delivering and distributing these materials to students in a wide range of formats. We hope that by providing a statewide discount to all Maryland institutions, you'll be able to take advantage of this platform to support your own OER adaptation and creation efforts and provide a centralized authoring and sharing platform for your institutional OER. In this session, Elizabeth Mays from Pressbooks will show some of the key features of Pressbooks and how they're used in the open education space. So Liz, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us. I'm very excited to demonstrate Pressbooks for you. But first, I'm going to give a little bit of context about what Pressbooks is and sort of how it started, where it is today, and where it's going. The first thing to know is that Pressbooks really, when we first started out, it was very much of a content creation tool. It was a way to get your content into a variety of formats that were needed in order to publish a book. And originally we really thought, self-publishers would be like a huge audience for this, small presses, etc. Another thing we were really hoping to do was to discover what the future of books on the web was. And unfortunately, what we learned is that a lot of proprietary publishers don't really want to make their books free on the web. And so something that happened was we learned that there was a huge use case as the OER movement developed over the past few years. There was a big use case for the web book that is part of Pressbooks. And so what Pressbooks can let you do is it can let you take content that you have or create content that is well structured and exportable in a number of formats, while also being able to make that content free to your students and the general public and other faculty, other places, openly on the web. And we do support a range of open licenses as well. So another piece of context is that as that product evolved, we developed what's called Pressbooks EDU. And in that product, we learned that faculty who were using this wanted to do a number of things that they couldn't already do on the tool. And so over the years, we added a lot of features around interactivity. One of those is the H5P plugin that's available in Pressbooks EDU. It lets you create quizzes, flashcards, and other interactives. Another thing that we added was the cloning tool, which enables you to take an OER that already exists in the ecosystem, and if it's public, openly licensed, and built on Pressbooks, you can then create an editable version of that. And so as we move forward, one of the directions that we're going is improving upon some of those interactive capabilities. One thing we added last year was the ability to deliver the content you create on Pressbooks into the learning management system, whether you're using Canvas or Moodle or Blackboard or D2L. Now, though, what we're hoping to do is to connect the quizzes and such, that interactive content that faculty are building with the gradebook of the learning management system. So that is a feature that will be coming out later on this year that you can add to your plan if you want to. So that's a bit of sort of where we've been, where we're going. I'll also give you a little bit of context on the platform itself. So when you have a Pressbooks EDU system, you have your own network if you're buying one as an institution. So for instance, this is UC Berkeley's network, and you can see that they've customized their logo, their colors, they've added their own background image. They're using this in the way that they want to use it. A similar project is at the University of Saskatchewan, and you can see that it looks similar but different. Still, they've customized the logo, the colors, they're using the blocks differently, and then you can see they're using the catalog feature fairly robustly. So if you go to this catalog feature, they have chosen to essentially, let me back up. You can actually, in Pressbooks, you can have a book that's private, you can have a book that's public, or you can have a book that's public and in this catalog if you choose to. And what I'm seeing generally is that people who are running OER grant programs, they are typically putting the vetted books that have been through that grant program or gotten some sort of university support into the catalog, but you can utilize this however you want. So you can essentially show off the work that your institution is doing in OER. Another key functionality of Pressbooks is the notion of a webbook. So this is one webbook. You can see that it's openly licensed. And not only can students go to this webbook and read it for free on whatever device they might choose, including their desktop or their tablet or their cell phone, it is mobile responsive. They can navigate it lots of different ways, just free on the web. But the great thing about the webbook, especially on the educational version, is that you can surface all the exports that you happen to want to surface for your students, the public, other faculty at other institutions who may need these alternate formats as well. And this comes in very handy when you have a student who, for instance, may not have internet access briefly. Maybe they're traveling, maybe they're on an airplane, maybe they're in a rural area. So this allows you to make any or all of the export formats that you want available. Another thing that's really important is while Pressbooks does export in these proprietary formats for typical publishing use cases, so for instance, the EPUB is for ebook stores, the print PDF is for your print-on-demand provider, the MOBI is for Amazon, it also allows you to export in open formats. And these are a way to make your open content more useful to the ecosystem. So if you surface these particular outputs, then someone who wants to remix your book can do so even if they're not going to use Pressbooks to do it. So these are open enough where they can use a different software tool if they would like. So I will actually show, well, first I'll show a little bit of the interactive possibilities, and then I'll show how some of these features work inside the platform. So this is one example of a Portuguese textbook that was built by the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And they're a really good example of the interactivity aspect. So one thing they've done is they've structured this book where it's a lesson followed by a dialogue, and they've uploaded some audio of a dialogue, and then they've included a transcript. And then they've utilized the H5P plugin in Pressbooks EDU to develop some quizzes to help students assess their understanding of the material they just read. So here is one such exercise. And so you can see that I can, try to, here I'm going to mark the conjugated forms of a verb. In this particular case, the person who set this up allows me to see the solution and retry, but you don't have to do it that way. Other interactive capabilities are the ability to annotate, to make annotation possible on your book. So this is one example of how that might look. This is a book with hypothesis enabled in Pressbooks. And in this particular case, we're looking at public annotation. So public feedback, reactions, commentary, people extending the book in different ways. But if you were logged into Hypothesis, you could also create private groups. So the way I would use that is if you want your class to comment on a book, a text you're using in the class built on Pressbooks, I would create private groups for each section of the class or each semester of the class, and that would help you isolate the conversations to just one class at a time and make those conversations private. Another thing you can do is make glossary terms that have this very nice drop down. You can also auto-populate a glossary. You can include PhET simulations. You can include videos, and these are just copying and pasting a link. You can include night lab timelines and story maps. So this is a way where, for instance, this could be a chapter about a poet, and then in the middle of it, you insert this timeline so people can not only sort of read the chapter as they normally might, but they can navigate through this timeline to better engage with that material. You can also create easy text boxes. You can easily create tables without doing any coding using a tool called TablePress that is available in our EDU version. You can also utilize a thing called MathJax, which is very popular with our STEM faculty using Pressbooks. So it gives you a number of options, such as enabling Zoom to happen on a certain action, or determine the factor by which you'll zoom something. You can render the math in different formats. There are a number of accessibility features, and then you could change the equation into a different language. So that's just a sampling of some of the interactive capabilities of Pressbooks. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to dive in to essentially showing you some of this functionality inside the platform. And I'm going to start with the cloning tool. So this happens to be a library. BC Campus runs a great library of OER out there. And one of the things they've done recently is take a number of books, 33 of the OpenStax books, which are really good and well-used OERs that are produced through a traditional publishing process over at Rice University. And they put all of these into their Pressbooks network. And what that means is that they are now very easy to remix and to clone and to edit for anyone who happens to have a Pressbooks EDU system. So for instance, this is an OpenStax book. And in order to get to the Pressbooks version, I click on Editable and Website. And then I am now at this book in their Pressbooks network. So all I need to do to make this book editable and remixable for me is to clone this book into my Pressbooks network. So a few minutes later, all the content of that book will come into this tool in an interface that's very similar to WordPress if you've ever used WordPress. And I will be able to delete chapters, add new contributors in the attributions. I'll be able to edit within chapters. And what's the reason this is the best way to copy a book is because it will bring over all the attributions for the original authors and creators. It will bring over the attributions on your media elements. It will bring over the media, and it will bring over any H5P exercises if there were any in the original book. So if you have a Pressbooks network and you have an OER you want to clone that's built in Pressbooks and public and openly licensed, you would want to be using this tool. So I'm going to go to this clone now. And if I go to the Organize dashboard, I can do lots of things. So I can delete this chapter. I can add another. And you can see that this interface looks very much like adding a post or a page in WordPress. While Pressbooks is not WordPress, it is built on WordPress, so the interface should be rather familiar. I can also start editing within chapters. And then I can go into the metadata and add contributors from the new version if I so choose. So that's cloning. I'm also going to show how to create a book starting out from scratch. And that also is quite simple. So you might have someone who is wanting to, now I can make this book public and then make all of the chapters private as I work on it as well. So you could, for instance, if you're releasing a week of your book at a time to students, that might be something you want to do. But for this demo book, I'm just going to make this a private book while we work on it. So this is the new shell, and you'll see that it comes with a little bit of dummy content, which you can delete or edit. So there's your front matter, which is things like the foreword or introduction. There's your back matter, things like the glossary, appendices, that sort of thing. And then Pressbooks thinks in terms of parts and chapters. So main body is a part, and I'm going to create a second part as well. I can also add new chapters. And then these are also movable. So if I decide after I've structured this that really this should come before this other chapter, I can do that. I can move them from part to part. So this is always, a book remains revisable in Pressbooks forever. So I've heard of faculty, even in the middle of their class, if they're using a text, somebody says, oh, I found a typo in chapter 9. They've gone in and said, oh, I'm going to fix that for you right now. Sort of that immediacy. And you might also want to, for instance, make a clone of this book every semester for your updates, if you'd like to keep a copy of the older version. Another thing that people have used that cloning tool for is after making a master clone of something, perhaps an OpenStax book, you might make 20 copies of that and dole one out to each of the faculty members teaching that subject if they're all going to be using this different text. And that way they could customize different pieces of the text to the way they teach, whether it's localizing the examples, or changing the order of a text, adding something in that they feel is really important, changing the examples, different things like that. So here we are, we have sort of, a shell of a book here. One thing we'd want to do next is add our metadata. So here's where you could change your title. You can add new contributors very easily, and these contributors do not need to have access to your Pressbooks network. So sometimes you'll find that maybe a staff member is doing this on behalf of a faculty, and that is perfectly fine. Or you might have a contributor far away who also is not granted access to the network. So this is how you can credit a wide range of contributors to your OER. You can indicate the publisher and date, city, etc. You can add an ISBN or a DOI if you have one. You can upload a cover for your webbook and your ebook here. You can categorize the book. You can indicate who owns the copyright. And most important, you can assign this a copyright license. And this is probably the most important decision that you'll make. So this determines, whatever is selected here, determines whether or not a book is technically clonable in Pressbooks by other Pressbooks networks. So an all rights reserved book is not going to be clonable. All of the Creative Commons licenses that allow for derivatives will also be clonable by other Pressbooks EDU networks. So that's an important thing to understand as well. So when you've made your decisions, you'll just save your book information. And you might also want to change the layout of your book. Now in Pressbooks, all of these decisions are made in as universal a way as possible. So the first way to change the appearance would be to change the theme of your book, just like you might on a WordPress blog. So here, if I want to activate a new theme, I just click Activate. And then I might want to make some minor adjustments to that. And I'm going to make them in theme options so that they apply across the book. You never want to make inline changes inside of a chapter. So for instance, you wouldn't want to indent 5 spaces or something like that of every paragraph in your chapters. There's a way to do that universally under theme options. So we have global options, which apply to all of the formats of the book. And you can see what some of these include. Here's where you might change those text box colors, for instance. Each time you'll want to save your changes. We also have books options that only apply to the web book. So here's where you might decide whether to indent or skip lines between paragraphs in that format, and some other decisions. And again, you would save your changes. The PDF options apply to the print-on-demand format. And probably the most important decision here is the trim size. But this is what's so magical about Pressbooks, is when you change this, Pressbooks automatically reflows the whole book for the print-on-demand version, and you don't have to do any manual like reformatting at all. So it saves tons and tons of time, especially if you're using Pressbooks for a traditional workflow to get that PDF. You can also change things like the margins and the running footers and heads as well. And then ebook options, probably the most important one, is whether or not to compress images, which is something you may want to do. If you feel like customizing further, you can still do that universally. You would just get into the CSS, and there's a CSS sheet for each of the 3 main formats, and you would just copy and paste the CSS that you're wanting to change into your web styles and make your changes here. But again, I don't really recommend this for most users. It's not typically something that people have found necessary, but it is something, if you're an advanced user, that you want to do, you could certainly do that. So when you are ready to preview your book, or you're ready to publish it, you would want to decide which formats to export it in. If you've chosen the option to showcase these export formats on the webbook homepage, whatever you select here is what's going to show there. So for the sake of just demonstrating what an export looks like, I'm just going to select the PDF, but probably if I were doing an OER, I would select most of these formats. And you can see that that created a file that now I can download. So this PDF, if this were my final PDF of this book, I would download it, and then I would upload it to my print-on-demand provider, whether that's Ingram Spark or Lulu or my bookstore at my campus or something like that. The one thing to know about these, so the PDF is for print-on-demand. The PDF for digital distribution has the images compressed, so it would not pass print-on-demand requirements. However, it would be better if you're emailing the PDF to someone. You would use the smaller one. The EPUB is for different ebook stores. The MOBI is for Amazon. And then some of these other formats, these are really open formats that enable, it's sort of more of a raw format where you can essentially remix this. No matter what software you have. And then these 4 formats you will only see on the educational version of Pressbooks, and you'll only see the first one on the basic version. So this common cartridge export with web links allows you to take a book in Pressbooks and take this export format and put it into your learning management system and have it broken up as the spine of your course. So essentially, if you have a part on Pressbooks, it would become a module in your LMS. And if you have a chapter on Pressbooks, it would then become a page within a module. So that's what that does. And then these deeper, these other common cartridge files with LTI links are part of the deeper LTI integration. And you'll only see them if you have that on the network that you've purchased. So these will allow you to do everything that the web links allow you to do and some more. So in these cases, it's going to be a much more seamless sync rather than being something where there's still an external link. It's sort of like a clear iframe embed. These wouldn't necessarily let the viewer know that they've left the LMS at all. It looks like you're still there. These also will allow you to sync private content. So every once in a while, we've seen someone do a course reader or something that has to be, it's copyrighted content. It can't be made live publicly on the web, but it can be delivered through educational copyright uses through the LMS in that walled garden. So you can send something from Pressbooks that's formatted there that's private into the LMS using this deeper LTI integration. And the other bonus there is that if you do make a change to the Pressbook, it will instantly be reflected in the LMS. So that's what those are all about. And I'm going to go to sort of a demo book to show you how some of the fun features that I showed you earlier are created. So again, going to the dashboard of this book, let's say that we wanted to create some text boxes. So I'm going to find an open spot. So all I need to do that is just go to this text box dropdown and add my favorite text box. And then you can change the text, of course. All of this is customizable. And that's a really nice way to get an attractive way to structure your content without doing any coding to get that. So that's one thing I really like. I use those for, think about this, learning objectives, examples, different things like that. Another thing you can do is that glossary item. So here is a chapter with a glossary item in it, and you'll see there's a little short code around the term. So I'm going to take that away because I did not have to come up with that short code on my own. All I had to do is highlight the term, and then I could create and insert a term here, but I'm going to choose an existing term and insert that, and see Pressbooks inserts the short code. And then when you go to that chapter, that term will now have the drop down. I can also create those terms here. So I've pre-populated this book with a number of terms. And this little checkbox determines whether or not Pressbooks will show this term in the auto-populated glossary if you use that. So I do want this term to show, and I've saved it. And so now if I want to create an auto-populated glossary, I am just going to go to the back matter. I can call this anything I want. And then I just have to tell Pressbooks that this is a glossary. And then I need to leave this blank. So I'm going to create this. And when I go to this, it's going to take all of those glossary terms that had the checkbox into this auto-populated glossary, including today's term. And you can see that that is a great way not to have to, cut and paste or copy things over to your glossary. It's a really nice little tool. Another thing you can do is add H5P content. So H5P is a really nice tool, and this is a plugin that we've made available in PressbooksEDU. It allows users to create up to 40 different types of interactive content inside of their OER or books that they're creating on Pressbooks. You can see there's a quiz, there's flashcards, there are games, there are different things like speaking the words, hotspots, 360, virtual tours, different things like that. This is another way to create a timeline, audio types of things, just a lot of fun things that you could add to make your book or your content more fun and engaging. So I'm just going to show a multiple choice quiz to show how this would work. This is just the title for metadata. This would be your quiz question. Let's say answer 1 is correct. And then you would create this. And again, Pressbooks is going to create a shortcode, and you're just going to take the shortcode and put it in any chapter you want. It can go anywhere in the chapter, around text if you want it to, whatever you would like. So I've added the shortcode, and when I go to this chapter, you'll see that the quiz is there. Another thing that's very easy to do is to create tables using a tool called Table Press. So here, if I wanted to add a new table, it's very simple. I didn't need any code to create this. Then if I want to make some choices to style this table, I just have to click a few checkboxes. So let's say that we want to do these things. I can also give the user control of the table, like if I want to enable them to sort it, to filter or search it, to paginate the table, to change the number of rows that are shown to them, different things like that. And I just save these changes. And again, I get a shortcode. So again, I'll just go wherever I want in my book. And I will add that shortcode. And this is obviously like an example with no content, but you can see that was an easy way to create something attractive and well structured. One thing that I will also mention is when you're adding media, particularly when you're working in OER, the attributions are quite important. So if I were adding this image, you'll see, or even if I'm just editing it, you'll see that I'm able to add alt text, which is very important. You'll see that I can also attribute, for instance, if I got this off of Pexels or something, I could enter the URL of the network I found it on. I could add the author and give them credit. I could add the author's website if I wanted to. I can indicate the license so that people remixing this book know. If I adapted this, I can give myself credit. And then I could even link to my website to credit myself as the adapter of this media item. So that is a nice tool as well. And then finally, you might not always be working directly in Pressbooks or cloning something from Pressbooks. So there are other ways to get content into Pressbooks. So if you happen to have, for instance, an EPUB, maybe that's your only copy of a book that you're now wanting to update, you can easily import that into Pressbooks. You might have faculty who are working on, course materials that just happen to be in Word already. You can upload those again very easily. The trick in order to get Pressbooks to recognize the chapters and break it into chapters is to make each chapter's heading an H1. We also alternately have a number of shortcodes that translate into Pressbooks from Word to Pressbooks. You could also use those shortcodes to do that, to accomplish that same thing. A Word document, it could also be like a Google document that you've downloaded as a Word document, which is another workflow that I've heard of people using. OpenOffice, very similar. XML, this might be if you had a blog that you had been blogging your materials and you want to make it more into a book-like structure. You could export the XML on the WordPress side and then import it into Pressbooks this way. And then you might even try scraping a web page, sort of depending on the page you're trying to scrape. You may need to do some cleanup of that. But one thing this is particularly good at is if you have a Pressbooks book that you don't want the whole thing, where you just want one chapter from it or something, this would enable you to select just that chapter for import. So it's useful in that way as well. So once you've chosen the import type, you could either upload the file or import from a URL, depending on your preference. And that's a relatively easy process. So with that, I normally get a number of questions, and I'm just going to go over those right now. Pulling up my list, so looking off to the left at my list. Sorry about that. I often get a number of questions about how Pressbooks EDU differs from our freemium tool that's more designed for self-publishers. And there are a number of features that are only on the EDU version. Those include the cloning ability. So the cloning tool, the one-click cloning tool, is only on Pressbooks EDU. That also includes the H5P plugin that would only be available on Pressbooks EDU. The brandability of the platform goes to whoever has purchased the Pressbooks EDU network. The catalog feature is another piece. And of course, there is training that comes with your enterprise network, not only for sort of the managers of that network, but for any faculty or user at your institution. We also do provide support on our enterprise plans to what we call network managers. And these are non-technical staff, typically librarians, instructional designers, staff members, who are sort of the point people for the Pressbooks network. And they can escalate any support issues that they're not able to answer easily to us. So if something is not behaving the way that's expected, or if something is just sort of a nuanced question or something that they're not sure the answer to, they can send an email to our support desk and get a very rapid response. Another piece that is only on the educational version is the analytics. So in this version, you can not only add your own Google Analytics for your institution, but then you can also get some network usage stats. So this will show you, is the use of your network growing? Are people creating more and more books as time goes on with your OER program that you're running from this network? Who has been really active in a given period? Are there any books taking up a lot of storage? You can kind of see what the bigger books are, and then you can go to the media connected with them and see, oh, did someone upload like a 10 megabyte image? You can see those things. You can also see the activity on your network in terms of the books being created. So you can sort those a number of ways. You might want to say, what are the public, most openly licensed books? Or you might want to say, which departments are really using this? Who's finding the most value in this? Maybe I'll do a departmental reach out. You can see size of a book. So for instance, an 81 word book is probably a test book, but a 50,000 word book is probably a real book. You can also see, what are the popular themes and which of them are allowing downloads of those exports. And I would argue that this is probably the biggest indicator of whether a book is completely done or if its creator believes it is done. Another thing you can do is you can also see the users on the network. So here, you could download a CSV of all your users, and maybe you'd want to reach out and say, hey, I see you're using our institutional Pressbooks network. We're forming a community of practice. You'll get training on OER, that type of a thing. You can then reach out to those people. Or if you wanted to reach out to one person in particular who's doing like a lot of content, you can see who's been added recently, who's logged in recently, who has certain different roles, like maybe you have student workers helping and you need to deactivate them from time to time. You can see who's in a number of books. Maybe that's a staff member helping a faculty member. You can see different roles in a number of books as well. So many things you can do in that way. The other thing that is not available in the freemium version would be that support for MathJax. So in Pressbooks, you can use LaTeX either way, but in the EDU version, you have your choice of LaTeX or MathJax syntax, and we have that support for MathJax as well. I'm looking at my list to see if there's anything I missed. Oh, and one minor thing is the ability to showcase these export formats on the book homepage, and then also these extra export formats. So if we're in a book, these 4 export formats are exclusive to the educational version, and these 3 are part of the add-on on top of that, the LTI integration add-on. So those are the questions I'm typically answered. So I'm going to pause there and just end by saying, If you ever would like a deeper demo or a demo for stakeholders at your institution, go ahead and email us. We're always glad to do that. You can email us at sales@pressbooks.com. And we'd be glad to do something like this or something customized for you if that meets your needs as well. So again, please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or you'd like a demo for your own organization at sales@pressbooks.com.